Thank you. I'm Judy Kay, as you probably could guess. This is the work of my PhD student, Chris Ackad, and my colleague, Martin Tomitsch from the Design School. So I want to introduce this since we're doing a bit of a shift. It's a gesture-based display, but it's really about the user representation for feedback. So what is the context and motivation of our work? And it is a system that is on the outside of a building that you see on the left there, facing onto a courtyard with a theatre across, and there is the display. We use a Connect to detect the user gestures. And here's an example of it at play. The user swipes to move it along, arm up to get more detail, and then swipes along, and then again can put an arm up to do a like. So this was designed so that people walking through our courtyard could come along and see this exciting display funded by our dean, because he thought, what else would you want to do than know about the research in the Faculty of Engineering when you come to the theatre? And so we built this display, and here's the part of it that is about research in the faculty. There were actually 132 to 155 items, depending on when we were running it, because we actually had other content too. So the idea was you came along like the person you saw, and you had to, on the fly, first of all, notice that you could interact, decide you want to, and then learn how to do the gestures, because I assume none of you knew that those were the gestures. And then, of course, you had to read our wonderful content. So this is the context. It's a large display projected on a glass wall just to make things harder. It only operates at night. There are pedestrians walking on these routes, unlikely to catch them mostly, they're catching the train, and theatre goers who've perhaps got a bit more time until the bell goes. So what's all this about user representation? And we had a hint of it in a previous talk. Obviously it's partly for feedback, but for this large screen display it's much more important. So here, in case you missed it in the previous slide, is the skeleton that is the user representation in one of the conditions we looked at. Now this display is our coding interface. You're seeing the depth image on the left. The users didn't see that. The main display is what the users did see, and then there's some coding stuff on the top. So here we have the other user representation, a silhouette. And otherwise you're seeing again, this is the coding interface. The user only saw the stuff that doesn't have the depth image, though they look awfully similar in this case. Just enlarged, this is a skeleton, this is a silhouette. And why on earth did we want to compare them? Well, we started our work and we looked at what happened in the wild studies when we analysed data from the longest sessions, and this is the sort of stuff we saw. They weren't there reading about the Faculty of Engineering and its research. They were dancing, really dancing. There was lots of play. There was some browsing. I don't want to underrate that. But we had to seriously consider this issue of play, which, to be honest, I hadn't. I would also point out that nearly all large screen display work has involved playful interfaces. I think I see why now. Anyway, that wasn't where we came from. We then did quite a lot of work published last year at Ubicomp on could people learn the gestures. And in that we also had the same issue, that there was a lot of playfulness, like this person here, who is clearly, well, probably not the least bit interested in the content, though when we did interviews people could actually tell us about some of the content. But this person is absolutely playing. So we asked ourselves, could it be the skeleton that's causing all this play? So at this point, the next bit of the background I have to give you is, why do we need a user representation for a system like this? And there are several reasons. I briefly mentioned them. Firstly, all of us have a lot of displays and we tend not to notice them much. It's called display blindness. But when the display echoes something you do, you're more likely to notice it. Interaction blindness is because most people don't expect to be able to interact with large screen displays. And again, the skeleton perhaps gives you a hint. It's really important for helping people learn the gestures since it's echoing what they do. And we thought it would encourage engagement. All of these. So we designed a study with 3 hypotheses. The first was that the silhouette would be more likely to have people do browsing, which was our original design goal. But the skeleton would be more playful, and we are still convinced we need to think a bit more about that, and we are working on that. But thirdly, that the skeleton would be associated with longer stays, because if you remember, I said that we initially analysed the longest staying sessions, and they had a lot of play. So what did we do? We collected 56 days of data with roughly similar numbers of people in each condition, and fairly similar sessions, where a session is when the first person in a group enters and is tracked by the Connect, and it ends when the last person in that group leaves. We did lots of automatic analysis of the sort you'd expect, the time at which things happened and the gestures that were recognised and so on. But we did qualitative analysis using the interface you saw before to determine whether people were playing or not, and to get a sense of what the interaction looked like. And here are our results. So first of all, previous work had led us to expect there'd be a difference between the conditions on this first measure. So this is looking at the percentage of people who face the display compared with those actually detected, and it's pretty much the same, certainly not statistically significantly different. However, of those users facing, you can see there is a statistically significant difference in the numbers that actually went on to interact. And in this case, the silhouette looks as though it's doing quite a lot better. As we'd expected, the session length also was quite different, in this case with the skeletons being quite long compared, almost 100 compared to about 70 seconds. Quite a long time to spend in a public space. We then teased out the details of the play and non-play. I've put use here because it would fit in the table. It means browsing seriously, serious use. And here we find, again, the same picture. The silhouette had 70% of the sessions had people just using it seriously, meeting our original design brief, which may have been a flawed design brief, but nevertheless, that's what happened. And then if you look at the 2 rows below, they weren't significantly different, but the only play sessions were longer, almost 90 seconds compared to 30. And the last 2 rows combined, where there was any play at all, that was more common in the skeleton condition. Again, strengthening this understanding that the play really does seem to be something to do with the skeleton. What's more, the nature of the play was different. So just as in this video, this person is dancing or playing with their representation. By contrast, when we had the silhouette, we tended to get people trying new gestures and seeing if they worked. Still quite playful, but quite different. Not large enough sample to get statistically significant results, and we didn't report them in the paper. So, overall, the silhouette was good for encouraging more people to do serious browsing. The skeleton, again, as expected, was more playful, and people stayed longer. And the key thing is that this was the first exploration of how a user representation affects the level of play when we design an interface for serious interaction, rather than just play. And that's it. Ready for questions.
Hey, thanks for the talk. Doug Bowman from Virginia Tech. So I'm wondering what your theory is about why the silhouette leads to more serious browsing behavior. There was a paper at IEEE VR this year about hand representations in virtual reality, and they compared abstract hands to skeleton hands to very photorealistic hands.
Okay.
And the finding there was that the photorealistic hands led to more ownership of the body, but the abstract hands led to more agency, i.e. more interaction, more control over the interaction. So that's slightly different than what you found. So I wondered what your theory was.
Our sense is it just looks more playful, actually. just sort of jiggles a little. I don't know how much you noticed it in those, but I think it just looks more playful. But I don't have a deeper theory than that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Benoit from Pamplona. Thanks for the talks, it was very interesting. And I was wondering, have you tested differences between adults and children, how they react?
Good question. We only had adults. Yes, we only had adults in this study, as it turns out. It runs only in the evenings because of limitations with the Connect. Not entirely the Connect, has to work through a plate glass wall. And yeah, so there were only adults in the videos we analysed on this occasion. In previous work, we have had some children. Our ethics means we don't interview children, but we did interview parents with children. So I guess what you're getting at is, would children play even more? And my guess is they probably would. Not only but that would be more complex because this content wasn't really written for children. I mean, of course, you'd want to know about research in the Faculty of Engineering, but it wasn't written for them.
And another question is, I guess it's for ethical issues, but have you tried, instead of silhouette, having the image of the people? Okay,
we did consider that, and there's been quite a lot of work. Frankly, we actually tried the image ourselves and it felt weird. It felt very uncomfortable to us. There was other literature that suggested it would have worked well. I just didn't feel comfortable with it, just based on the people in our lab. And that might be wrong. Yeah. I don't think the ethics people minded. The only thing they were fussed about is what we kept, and we're only allowed to analyse the depth image.
Okay. Thank you very much.